May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord. I thought I'd pause after the opening prayer to allow you a little time to get over the shock. Yes, it is still me, just not as you've seen me before. In fact, as no one has ever seen me before this week. I couldn't face returning to my 1980s hairstyle due to the lack of a hairdresser, and so decided short and sweet was the order of the day. Well, short at any rate. So hopefully you've now recovered and recognise it's me. A lack of recognition seems to be a hallmark of several of the post-resurrection appearances, but seems particularly pertinent to this story on the road to Emmaus. Why don't they recognise Jesus? There are a variety of reasons put forward, such as perhaps Jesus' body was so changed in its resurrection form, he wasn't easily recognised. It's fair to say that he's still the same, and then he's sort of not quite the same. He can eat and drink with them, talk with them, be touched by them even. But he can also appear in locked rooms, apparently just turn up and walk alongside them, and then without so much as a bye or leave you, disappear. However, ultimately they do recognise him, so he certainly hasn't changed beyond all recognition. Others suggest that the disciples had still to go on a spiritual or emotional journey before being able to recognise him. Some simply say, we don't know and never will know. I'd like to suggest a theory though, if that's not too bold. They simply weren't expecting to see him. That seems to me a reasonable assertion. He had died a few days earlier. Many years ago, just after we were married in fact, Christine and I were travelling back to the UK from Hong Kong. Our journey took us via Bangkok. While sat in an airport departure lounge, people watching as there's not a lot else to do, I noticed a woman enter at the far end of the room who looked just like Christine's aunt. Our conversation went something like this. Darling, that woman down there looks just like your aunt. No, it can't be. She's in Australia and staying there for several months. Okay. Christine, that woman that looks like your aunt has a very similar dress to your aunt. No, it can't be. She's in Australia and staying there for several months. Okay. Christine, you know that woman down there that looks just like your aunt and is wearing the same dress as your aunt? She's even got the same mannerisms as your aunt. That's your aunt. Looking up once more, Christine replies, no, it can't be. She's in Australia and staying there for several months. At which point I decided to watch and wait. A few minutes later, the woman walked past the end of our row, and you've guessed it, it was Christine's aunt. She was supposed to be in Australia, but due to a family emergency was on her way back early. I'd suggest Christine didn't recognise her simply because she genuinely wasn't expecting to see her. Who was the last person the disciples were expecting? Despite the fact that time and time again Jesus had told them that he would die and then be raised, it seems they weren't expecting him, and who could blame them? But return he did, and I want to look briefly at three hallmarks of this encounter. Firstly, he comes alongside them. Then he shares what they need to hear. And by the end, hope is renewed, and they're bursting to share the good news. They, Cleopas and his companion, quite possibly his wife, are understandably still caught up in the events of Good Friday, unaware that Sundays actually come. Downhearted, distressed even, wondering where did it all go wrong. Hopes dashed, fears renewed, mixed with an added layer of confusion following this morning's report. Jesus comes alongside them, draws close to them, making his presence felt. As they engage in conversation, he shares with them what they need to hear. He retells the story, unpacking the scriptures, reminding as well as revealing afresh how the sweep of the story was always leading to this, to his coming, to his offering of himself, to his death and resurrection. When he first appears to the frightened disciples in an upper room, he speaks peace. In his encounter with Peter, he speaks forgiveness. Here, he speaks understanding. Didn't our hearts burn within us, they later say, describing this encounter. Finally, once they recognize him, their hope is renewed. It's not over. In fact, it's only just beginning, and so overjoyed they rush off to tell the others. It was already evening, remember. They were settling down for the night, probably at their own home, but such was their joy they take to the road once more, bursting to share the good news. As we journey through these strangest of times, may we know Christ's presence with us. May we even recognize Christ's presence in those around us, those serving us, supporting us, encouraging us. May we hear the words that Jesus is speaking to us, to you, a word of life. To the frightened, be not afraid. To the anxious, words of peace. To the sick, healing. To the grieving, comfort. And may his presence and word renew our hope, that we, like Cleopas and his companion, will burst forth to share and be good news. Amen.